Hey guys, it's Jordan here with VFX Vault, and today we're going to be going over how to set up this simple little material with verse parameterization. In the latest version of UEFN, they added material parameterization, so now we can access anything we can set in our materials, any scalars, parameters and textures we can set in our materials, and we can change them on the fly with verse. So this simple little example here, you see we've got our progress bar. We can reset it. We can add 1% using this button, 10% or 50%. Or we can even randomize the color. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Let's get into it now. Coming into our project, the first thing we're going to do is create some new folders so that everything is organized. So we'll start off with materials, and then new folder. Textures, and another new folder for props. Next we're going to come down into our textures folder and import our progress bar texture. So we'll rename that progress bar, come into it, and you'll see it's just a really simple texture. You can use anything to author a texture like this. So in the first channel it's just the red border, and then in the green channel it's just the white interior. Now make sure that when you're importing something like a progress bar that we fill up the space. It's not going to be perfectly from sort of border to border, but if we're going to use a progress bar the way we're building it, from 0% here to 100% here, then you want to keep it as tight in the texture space as possible. And then in the green and the blue channel, in the blue and the alpha channel, we're not using anything. The other thing you want to make sure you set is you come over to compression settings down here, and we change it to user interface 2D. This way, when we put our texture in the level, it doesn't get as pixelated. Now the next step is we're going to come into the materials folder. We'll create a new material. We'll name it underscore progress bar, m underscore progress bar. And here's one I've built earlier, but we'll quickly go over exactly why we're using all of this stuff. Now there are plenty of ways that we can do UI elements and these kind of progress bar elements, but this is just a simple tutorial on how to set up a simple one in the level. So we come back, and then we open m underscore progress bar, and we start with a texture sample. So right click texture sample, and we can plug in our texture. Next we set the color of the border, so let's convert this and we'll rename it to border color. And make sure that we don't use any spaces. So I've noticed with verse especially is that when we build our verse files, the asset digest that generates all of the parameters that we can access doesn't seem to like spaces. So we can use underscores if we want to separate our words, but for now we'll just use border and then capital C color. Next we multiply our color against our red channel, so set it to just blue for now. Then we also want for our progress bar, we want to multiply it against a linear gradient, so we can preview what this is doing here. So if we just pull out another multiply and we preview node, we can see that it's just giving us a gradient from 0 on the left side to 1 on the right side. So we can add and subtract for this to move our progress bar, and we can set it with verse so that our progress bar moves from left to right or right to left, however we want it. So next we just add, so we use our gradient offset and the x coordinate, and then we add a scalar. So now this is a scalar that we're going to access to actually move our progress bar. So we'll call this bar progress, and we'll plug that in. Cool. Next we want to multiply this so it acts like a mask, multiply it against our green channel. Next up, we've got the floor node. So type in floor. When we use the floor node, what it does is it pulls our value down to the next closest integer. So if we have a value like 0.3, it's going to pull it down to 0. If we have a value like 1.9, it's going to pull it down to 1. A value negative 5.6 is going to pull it down to negative 4. So it's always just removing the fractional part or pulling it down to the next lowest integer. If it's a negative number, then obviously it's going to pull it downwards as in further away from 0. So when we multiply our texture sample by our linear gradient, so if we multiply it by 0.5, or excuse me, we add 0.5 and then we multiply that against our texture sample, we can preview this node here, and you see because of our linear gradient, preview this, will be 0 here, 0.5 here, 1 here, and then we're adding 0.5. So imagine we're taking this whole image and adding 0.5 to it in every pixel. So now imagine this will be 0.5 over here, this will be 1 in the middle, and this will be 1.5 here. What that does is that pushes the number, when we multiply this, it pushes the number up above 1. So it's kind of hard to see on the left side here, but we're still multiplying this number by 0.5, and then we'll be multiplying this number by 1 and this number by 1.5. But if we floor that, it's going to remove this part here, because this will be 0.5, so it's going to pull it down to 0. In the middle, it'll be 1, so it'll keep it at 1. And at the top, it'll be 1.5, so it's just going to pull it down to 1. So if we preview that now, you can see that we've cut off half the image. And it's perfect because 0.5, obviously halfway along our progress bar. So if we say change it to 0.25, then it's 1/4 of the way along our progress bar. 0.75, you know, it's 3/4 of the way along our progress bar. 1 completely filled up, so 0.5 for now. Now next, what we want to do is also set saturate. So for those who don't know, saturate is kind of like a clamp. So say it clamps the value between 0 and 1. When we're adding to our progress bar, this number here, because we're adding to this, remember this value on our texture is 1, we're adding to it, we could eventually go above 2 even, and then our floor is going to pull it down to 2, and then when we multiply that against our color, it might cause issues to make the color even brighter as the progress bar keeps moving along. So we don't want that, we just want our values between 0 and 1. So we plug in a saturate. Next, we want to set it up so it has an opacity mask. So we might have this element as like a floating progress bar. We want to get rid of these, the harsh edges on our plane. So what we can do is we can come over to our blend mode, change it to masked, and we put a little add here. And before we put in the little add, we're going to decide what color we want for our progress bar. So we can hold 3 and click. We can make another vector color. So if we convert this to parameter, and we'll call this progress bar color. So this is the color of the actual progress bar itself. Up here is just the color of the border that goes around it, but this is the progress bar. So we'll multiply this against this, and we'll give it sort of a similar bluish color, maybe a bit brighter, a bit more teal. And we'll just bring this up here to make a bit more space. Then we'll grab the saturate and we'll add it to just our border here, and we'll plug this into our opacity mask. We also want to give our progress bar just a little bit more visual clarity, a bit nicer. So what we can do is we can take our linear gradient, we'll copy it up here. Now we can invert it, which is a 1 minus. So if we preview it here, just using a multiplier. So if we start preview, so you see on the left here it's 0, on the right here it's 1. We can flip that around using a 1 minus, so it takes the input and inverts it. So now we've got 1 on the left and 0 on the right. And we just add another little 0.5 just so the number's not so dark on our left side. And we multiply that against our progress bar colors. So if we preview that, you see, again, it's kind of hard to see in the preview window, but it's a bit darker here and it'll be lighter on the left side. If we then add that together with our border color and then plug that into our base color, and then we stop previewing, you'll see now we've got our border with our progress bar. So we can just come in, tidy it up a bit, move this down across here, move this back across here, tidy this up. Now, nice little tooltip is if we hold, or sorry, press Q, it can straighten up our nodes for us. Move this along here, save this, and then once that's saved, we can come back in and we'll get into making a prop and putting it on a plane next. Come down to our props folder, we right click, new blueprint class, and we'll take the blueprint class name building prop, we'll underscore BP underscore progress bar prop, and we open that up, we bring it in, and under the static mesh component in our building and our progress bar prop, we can just set it to a plane. So we select the plane here. Now nothing will show up in terms of the material slot, so if we just compile and save, then the material slot shows up. We come back to our content browser and we just drag it over. It'll give us a performance warning, we just click OK. And we save and compile again. Now you notice in the preview window that it's quite sort of squashed up. We can increase the width by just setting the X scale to say 4, and now it's a bit more reasonably scaled. So if we save that, compile that, and then bring it into our levels, so we come along to props, drag it in, you see, drag it in, rotate it, and put it where we want. We're just going to put it over here. If we come back into our materials here, you'll see that if we open our progress bar, and we can come down to our bar progress, and we can just move this along, and you see that now it moves up and down with however much we set in our bar progress. So again, 0.8 would be say 80% progress, 1 would be full, 0 would be empty, 0.5 would be in the middle. So we can access this in bursts and we can change it dynamically depending on gameplay events, whatever we need. Moving on to the next part, we'll come over to our Verse Explorer. We go right click, add new verse file, and we'll just call it progress bar, and we go create. So you see it's created our new verse file, we go verse, build verse code, so it puts the device down into our content browser. We'll just drag it out into the level for now and just leave it over here, and then we can go verse, open verse project in VS Code. So now we've got our verse project and we'll come down to progress bar. Now we can get rid of this. So first things first, we'll make a bit of space. Now we want to be able to access the prop, we want to be able to access the buttons that we're going to use, and we want to be able to access the material. So first things first, we will add in an @editable for the props. So remember @editable so that we can set it using our verse device. @editable, we'll just call it panel prop, as in the progress bar panel, of type creative underscore prop is equal to creative prop. Next we want our buttons, so we'll go @editable and we'll start with a reset button. We'll add those in a minute, so we'll go reset button of type button device equal to button device, and then we'll put in the brackets, and then we can copy this because we want a couple of other buttons. So we want our add one, so we'll just call it, for adding 1%, we'll go 1% button, then next we'll copy that and go 10% button, copy that and say 50% button, so 50% button, and we'll also add a randomized color button, so copy one more time and go randomize color button. Lastly, so this is the other thing, is we need to create a object of our materials. So where we can find our materials is when we build our verse code, it creates this thing called the asset digest, and in our asset digest it's going to list out all of the textures, all of the materials, all the objects that we have in our verse project. So we can come down, you see we've got our materials, m_progress bar material, and then you can see the variables that we have access to. So at the moment we only have access to floats, colors and textures, but all we need here is our progress bar float, our border color, which is of type color, and our progress bar color. So we need to create an object of this so that we can assign it to our panel prop. So if we come back over to our main verse file and we'll go panel material of type materials dot m progress bar material is equal to the same thing. So we can create as many materials as we need and assign them where we want and set the values how we want. Next we'll come down to our on begin. So let me just bring up the code here on my other screen. So in our on begin we want to get our panel prop. So when the game starts, remember on begin, get our panel prop dot set material. So all of our props will have this function for setting material, and we'll set it to our panel material. And then we can set, when we begin we will go set panel material. So if we're setting the variables, because they're variables in our asset, remember, because we're the variables here, we need to use the setter. So go set panel material, say dot progress bar is equal to 0.0. Is that the right? Sorry, no, bar progress. So bar progress is equal to 0.0. And then we need to set up the functions that we call when we are pressing our buttons. So we'll start with the reset button. So before we build the functions, we'll just build the buttons. So we'll start with reset button dot interacted acted with event dot subscribe, and then reset. So we haven't declared our reset function yet, but we will in a second. But we'll just start with this one. So remember, we're getting our reset button, the button that we've set here, the button device that we set up here. We're getting the event when it's interacted with. We're subscribing to that event, so when it's interacted with, we're going to call the reset function. So we're calling a function here, calling the reset button. We need to pass in an agent, even though we're not going to use it. But we'll just go agent of type agent and void, because we're not returning anything from this function. So just for the reset, we're going to go set panel material dot bar progress, is equal to 0.0. Then we're just going to print current progress is equal to, and we can get the value by going panel material.bar progress like this. So when we reset it, we can see and double check that it is exactly what we need it to be. Next, we're going to copy this function here, and if we change this to our 1% button, 1% button interacted with, and then we can create a 1% function. So 1%, or sorry, let's call it add 1%, and we'll declare an add 1% function. So add 1%, 0%, and again we need to pass an agent even though we're not using it, because these functions expect an agent. So void equals, and we can just copy this and then set panel material. So this time, because we're adding a percent, we can go plus equals, and then we go 1.0. But the problem is now, because in our material we're going between 0 to 1, we've got a normalized range in our material, but here we want to pass in maybe whole values, because it might be a player's health between 0 to 100. What we can do simply here to fix this is just go divide by 100. So now if we pass in 1, it's going to divide it by 100 and add 0.01. So it's only going to move our progress bar up by 1%. If we did something like 10 or say 50 divided by 100, 0.5, it's going to move our progress bar up by half. So we'll just sit with 1 for now. And then again, we'll just leave this print here, and we'll just quickly come in and copy this down here. So add shift tab brings back, add 10%, and we'll change the value here, add 10%, and again, so we'll go add 50%, and shift tab to bring this back, add 50. So we can copy this back up here, copy both of these, and now for each of these other buttons that we're going to be adding, we can say grab the 10% button and the 50% button, and that looks right. So we're going to save this, Control S, and when we come back into our editor, we go build verse code, and now you see on our device it's generated a bunch of fields that we can use to plug in our different props and our different buttons. So in the top field here in the panel prop, because we've only got the progress bar on our level, we can grab the prop. So now it's accessing the progress bar. We come into all and we go type in button, so we can get our button device, and so we'll just bring it up here so it's kind of nice and square with our panel. And our outliner, just to make it easy, we can press F2 to rename this. We'll call this one reset button, and see, moves it down. And we'll also, interacting text, we'll just say reset. Now we'll drag this one, I'll hold Alt and drag, and F2 again, and we'll call this 1% button. And we'll change the text here, and we'll go add 1%, copy it again, rename this to 10% button, and we'll go add 10%, and one more time, and we'll rename this to 50% button. Give it 2. and add 50%. So if we come back to our device, we can plug in these buttons. So plug in the reset button, the add 1% button, the add 10% button, and the add 50% button. So now inside of our verse, if we come to our verse file, you see that we're accessing these buttons that we've plugged into our verse device, and then we're accessing the functions linked to those buttons. And then, oh, good thing I caught this, is we need to change the names of these functions here. So add 10% and add 50%. So now when we press our add 50% button, it's going to add, call the 50% function, add 10%, 10%, 1%, or we can reset the bar. So we can jump in and launch session. I'll pause the recording here and show you once we're in the game. Now that we've loaded into the game, we can see our bar, we can see our buttons. First we'll come up and we're going to say add 1%, add 10%, add 50%, we reset. So you can see it works perfectly. So if we add 50% and see in the top left, it's printing out the progress. And we can also set our number higher than 1, but for this example it doesn't really matter, so we reset. So if we can add 1%, it slowly goes up, add 10%, it steps up, and then add 50% and it's full. So perfect. We can also subtract, we can do anything we want. So we have access to any kind of float or any kind of color. So next we're going to go into how to randomize the colors. Next we want to get our 50% button. Let's just copy it one more time for a randomize color button, and we'll rename it again, randomize color. So let me get rid of that backslash, randomize color, and change it to randomize color for the tooltip. And we can come down here and plug it in into the randomize color button. Yeah, see random color. And then if we come back into verse, we need to access our randomize color button. So come down here, get our interacted with event, and we'll call this randomize color function. And then so when we click our randomize color button, when we interact with it, we call the randomize color function. Clear it down here, randomize color, and again pass the type agent, but we don't need it, and void because we're not returning anything. For the randomized color function, it's a little bit different. So we can, there's a couple gotchas with the asset digest. In the patch notes they said we have access to vector 4s, but currently verse only supports vector 3s and colors. So when we declare, if we come back to our material quickly and just open it up, see how if we have this parameter here, it's technically a vector 4 because we've got R, G, B and alpha, but in verse at the moment we can only access R, G and B. So if we come back to verse and come down to our access color, this is just of type color. So if we come back to our main verse file, what we can do is we can go set dot panel set panel material dots, and then what did we name the color? So if we come back to our asset digest, border color, and we'll just copy this quickly, set what was it, progress bar color, and we set it to type color, and we use a constructor, so R of get random float 0 2, 1, and then we do this for the G and the B channels. So gain and then G, and we just change the values to R, G, and B, and then we close the constructor. But you'll see here it's complaining. It says, did you forget to specify using verse color, which we did, so we can just copy that out of there and put it in at the top of our file. So using verse color. And the other one we didn't specify is using random. So we'll just copy this again and add using verse random. So now we can get a randomized color for each channel. And then we can just copy this down to here as well. So now when we call the randomized color button, it's going to get the parameter material and randomize the color on both the border color and the progress bar color. So I'm just going to save and push my changes, save, sort of build verse code, save that, close this, and push changes, and I'll come back once it's updated. So now that we've loaded back into the game, we can play around with our buttons a bit more. So add 1%, add 10%, and now hopefully this should work. Randomize color, there you go, perfect. So with the material parameterization, it unlocks so much in terms of customization, so much we can do in UEFN now with that. If there are any problems, if you guys run into any issues, let me know. This isn't perfect by any stretch, but it should be enough to get you going. At the moment, we only have access to floats, color, and textures. Now, hopefully in the future they'll unlock more and we'll be able to do way more cool things, but this is still super powerful. So if you like, feel free to leave a like, subscribe. If you run into any issues, just leave a comment down below. Or if you've got any suggestions for any other tutorials you'd like to see. Now, I'm not the best verse coder, but I really know my way around materials and VFX, and that's the kind of thing I want to build up with VFX Vault. We've got lots more content coming soon, so definitely keep an eye out. I want to keep doing more tutorials, but we'll see. I'm pretty busy with a lot of other projects, but if you liked, leave a like, subscribe, comment, all the rest. Thank you, and have an amazing day.